Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Since you're here, I would like to thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs a daily Big Picture quiz. Please do participate by going through the description in the Big Picture videos. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and contribute. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. So do continue to show your love and support. All the information is in the description of the video, so please go through it. Now on to the discussion. Bengal Governor Jagdeep Dhankar has taken serious offense at protests at the gates of his residence Raj Bhavan in Kolkata. The protests were against the arrests of members of the ruling Trinamool Congress in connection with the Narda bribery case. The governor claimed that the security of Raj Bhavan premises in Kolkata was breached twice near its north gate on Tuesday by certain unruly elements. He also shared video clips of both the events with Kolkata police and asked them to send comprehensive reports regarding the incidents and actions taken about the same. Now, Dhankar expressed concern over his security and claimed that the law and order situation in West Bengal was worrisome. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the role of the governor in a democracy. Joining me on the program today are Mr. PDT Achari, former Secretary General of the Lok Sabha and constitutional expert, Shekhar Iyer, senior journalist, and Kapil Sankla, advocate of the Supreme Court. Thank you to my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Mr. Achari, let me start the program with you first. The role of the governor has been discussed on several occasions. It has come to the forefront once again because of everything that has happened in West Bengal. In that context, let me start the program with you and hear your thoughts.
Well, we know what happened in West Bengal only through the newspapers. I have no other source of information. So whatever has appeared in the newspapers, on the basis of that, I will make my observations. Now, it seems the governor has given sanction for the proceedings against or the prosecution of the ministers and one MLA and maybe one or two other people. And CBI has arrested them. Now, the question is whether the governor has given sanction properly, and so far as the MLA is concerned, whether the governor is the authority who can give sanction. So these are the only two questions which I think arise from this development. So I will deal with these two issues. Now, your subject is role of the governor, but that's a very, very large issue. The role of the governor has been, discussed all these years ever since the Constitution came into force. In the Constitution, there was a lot of discussion on the role of the governor. At that time, of course, they had no knowledge about how the governor is going to behave in future. So we have experience of the last 40, 70 years about the action, the function of the governors. There have been many controversies and all that. I do not want to go into all that. But I must say that in our constitutional scheme, the governor is the constitutional head of the state. Constitutional head means he has no executive powers. And executive powers are all vested in the elected government. So what we see from the Constitution is that there is a governor who will act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Which means The executive power is with the elected government, but everything will be, every order will be issued in the name of the governor. But it is actually the decision of the executive government. Now here, so far as the question of sanction is concerned, that is provided in the PC Act, that is Prevention of Corruption Act. Now this provision has been made in the Prevention of Corruption Act to prevent frivolous and vexatious litigation against the government servants. When they function, perhaps there may be some excesses and all that. And many times we have found that there were vexatious litigations against officials, government officials.
Right.
So this provision was made in the PC Act to give some kind of a protection to the government servants who perform their duties under very trying circumstances. And this is a part of the law. Now, so sanction has to be given by the appointing authority for the court to proceed against, or the investigative agency to proceed against a person. Now, in the case of West Bengal, as I understand from the paper, press reports and all that, governor has given the sanction for the prosecution of these people.
Right.
Now, the question is whether the governor has given it independently of the Council of Ministers, and whether the governor has got the advice from the Council of Ministers. We do not know it.
Sure.
And if the governor has acted independently and without getting the advice from the Council of Ministers, then constitutionally that is not a correct procedure. The governor can act only on the advice of the Council of Ministers. So far as the executive exercise of executive functions is concerned. Of course, there are some areas left reserved for the governor where he can exercise his discretion. But this is an administrative act which needs to be done on the advice of the Council of Ministers. The second point is that there is an MLA who has been arrested. Now, for example, MLA to proceed against an MLA. Now, who is the authority who has to give sanction?
Right.
It is actually the Speaker. So this is this is what was made clear by the Supreme Court. Judgment in the Narasimha Rao case. It was made very clear that so far as the legislatures are concerned, then the sanctioning authority will be the Speaker. Although the law says the appointing authority, but here for an MLA and MP there is no appointing authority. They are elected by the people. But in order to meet the requirements of the law, Supreme Court laid it down that it is the Speaker who will give the sanction. In this particular case, I do not know whether the sanction has been given by the Speaker or by the Governor. If the sanction has been given by the Governor for the MLA, that is also not legally valid. These are the two things which I wanted to know. Thank you.
Absolutely. Points taken. Let me take the points that you're making forward with the other panelists and get a word in from Ms. Shekhar Iyer first. Shekhar Iyer, how would you look at this entire issue? Because the role of the governor has been questioned right from, not now, but from the elections time itself, and all the violence that we saw post the elections and in the lead up to the chief minister being reappointed rather. So how would you look back at everything that has happened in West Bengal, and specifically from the governor's point of view?
Well, the Bengal case is a quite a case that involves some legal issues, as pointed out by Acharya ji, as well as certain ground situations that we have seen there. If the governor is bound by the very constitution, then the government that is elected is also bound by the constitution. But apart from the issue of sanctioning by the governor, we also saw a very bizarre act being, enacted, where the chief minister, an elected person who is sworn to uphold the constitution, goes and sits in a dharna. Our supporters completely target a central investigative agency, and then her own law minister enters the premises of the CBI, and even as they want to produce the arrested persons before the court, they are prevented from doing so. So there is a virtual hearing. And this goes on for more than 6 hours when our own law minister, and not only that, a member of parliament who is also lawyer for them, is seen as intimidating the CBI officials. And subsequently, there is stone throwing, there is total hooliganism on the streets of Calcutta and all over West Bengal in clear violation of the protocol concerning COVID arrangements. Now, well, these may be issues beyond the power of the governor, but these are also part of the picture. Now, apart from this, whereas do you see a situation as soon as election results are declared, right after the new chief minister sworn in, violence is unleashed against opposition parties. I'm using the plural parties because lest we think the matter is not serious only because BJP people have been targeted. That is not so. CPM officers were burnt. CPM leaders were targeted so as to give us the veracity of the incident apart from the BJP. So we hear already a petition is there before the Supreme Court seeking a CBI inquiry where 18 workers have been stated to have been belonging to the opposition party have been killed. And there are numerous stories of how the ruling party muscle men target voters who did not vote for them. Now, Bengal has had a history of political violence. In that situation, what should be the role of all the constitutional bodies? The constitution clearly says, the governor has certain role, the governor has to follow this, and the state government has to do something. But in a situation where you cannot expect one office to sit in the Raj Bhavan and follow everything, and when the elected chief minister is unleashing violence and she does not do anything to stop it. Now, can we just close our eyes and say it's all about constitution and power of the governor? I'm asking a question because all these issues are going to come before the Supreme Court. They are being argued in Calcutta High Court today. So therefore, I think there is a bigger thing. And then the governor undertakes tour of those villages because there is no attempt by the elected state government to stop the violence. Now, governor as a constitutional head of the state, should he just keep quiet and wait for the violence to unleash? People are killed because this has happened before. And Mamata herself has been target of such violence. After all, we have seen her coming to Delhi, parading people who were victims of political violence between 1977 and 2000 till 2011. So there is a history behind what we are seeing there, where constitutional norms have been thrown to winds by so many agencies and so many authorities. This the dharna against CBI by elected chief minister is not the new one. On the earlier occasion, we saw when the CBI wanted to question the Calcutta Police Commissioner, similar drama happened. And already Kolkata High Court, in its preliminary observations, has come down heavily on the conduct of the chief minister. So there are several issues in this. I would not like to, simply look at the power of the governor because extraordinary situations may call for extraordinary responses. And perhaps
Right.
we do not know what is absolutely legal because if we are going to go strictly by the statute book, the answers may not be very clear and very convincing.
Sure, absolutely. Kapil Sankla, let me bring you in now, and because the courts and everything are looking into this matter, we'd like to hear a legal expert's opinion on this particular matter as well. From a legal perspective, your thoughts on this entire issue?
So first of all, I think the timeline is really important in this. Let me just first of all say that, as far as CBI is concerned, they have been very lax in the investigation time and again in number of matters. In fact, in 2013, the Honorable Supreme Court had called them caged parrot and listening to their master's voice, etc., etc. But certain facts are very important here. The tapes were made somewhere in 2014. In 2016, the matter went to the Honorable High Court. The Honorable High Court said that let this matter be investigated by CBI. During the same period, parliamentary committee was constituted regarding these tapes. These tapes were handed over to the parliamentary committee. Nothing came out of it. What is also important is thereafter, charge sheet in the matter was filed somewhere in was prepared and made ready somewhere in 2019. And according to CBI, this is what CBI is claiming, that they have been waiting for the sanction since 2019 or thereabout, and nothing has turned up. Now, the sanction has been given by the governor. This is what the question is, whether the sanction is legal under the constitutional powers of the governor or not. But there is also a very important question. And the question is this, that what were the accused or the state government doing since 2019 when the charge sheet was made ready by the CBI? Also, if the governor in fact gave the sanction, say 2 weeks back, why did the state government, the powers that be, or the accused challenge the sanction? See, we argue on sanction day in and day out. It is one of the most controversial parts of the PC Act, of the Prevention of Corruption Act. Whether the authority has the sanction or not, whether the sanctioning authority is proper or not, is argued probably in every CBI matter. And the PC Act says that once you give up that challenge, you cannot subsequently raise that challenge. The question here is not whether the governor rightly or wrongly granted sanction. The question here is, why did the state government, the so-called proper and just sanctioning authority, or the accused not challenge it before the court of law and attempted to play it in front of the media? So this is basically a political warfare. It is not a legal warfare. That is the first part of it. Whether the governor has the power or not under 163, 162 or 164, whether there are discretionary powers or not, there are judgments both ways. The Honorable Supreme Court has said that in rarest circumstances, in special circumstances, the governor can step in and not listen to the Council of Ministers. There have been judgments in Mayawati case, for example, in Narasimha Rao, for example, the court has said that MLA and MP are public servants and will be governed under the same ambit under the PC Act. In the Mayawati case, in another case, the Ramdas Srinivas case, 1982, the Honorable Supreme Court stated that yes, the governor having granted sanction because of whatever reason was just and proper. And these are special circumstances when there were ministers involved and MLAs involved and sitting ministers. So when you talk about precedents, the precedents are there. But as a lawyer, as a man of law, I would ask the first and primary question, and I think this is what the Supreme Court or any other court would ask: what were you doing as soon as you got to know that the sanction has been granted by the governor, rightly or wrongly? Why did you not challenge it? Why did you wait for the time that you will be arrested and thereafter seek bail and play it in the media the way it was played? So that is the most important thing. As far as the powers of the sanction of with the governor is concerned, rightly or wrongly, there are precedents, and second, it is a matter of interpretation of the Constitution of India. As the court has said, that there are discretionary powers that the governor can exercise, and these circumstances are called special circumstances as far as Supreme Court is concerned.
Sure. Points taken. Let me take the points forward now. Mr. Rachari, coming back to you now. Let's talk about it from this perspective as to when can the governor then intervene in a situation like this, where we've seen violence and we've seen that the state machinery doesn't seem to be working at optimum level.
See, as far as I could understand, the governor can bypass or governor can ignore the decision of the Council of Ministers when the governor feels that it is totally irrational kind of decision of the Council of Ministers, or the Council of Ministers are suffering from some kind of incapacity, incurable incapacity. In these circumstances, certainly the governor can exercise his power and take a decision without getting the advice of the Council of Ministers. Otherwise, generally, the law laid down by the Supreme Court on various occasions. And in 2016, that Nabeem Rabia case, the Supreme Court had made it very clear that the governor has to act on the advice of the Council of Ministers. And the court also said, and in such extremely rare kind of circumstances, where the decision of the Council of Ministers is wholly irrational. This is the word which they have used. So here the question is whether such a situation has arisen. As both the panelists have in a way said that it is actually a political situation. So political situation is something which we cannot decide about. Political situation has to be decided or finally settled by the people. That is it. There was an election in the state of West Bengal, and one party has won decisively, and the other party has lost decisively. Now, in this situation, as my friend Mr. Iyer had said, political violence is something which does happen in this country. It has happened in this country at different times. Political violence is nothing new. And the question is, when a very large-scale violence, as it is alleged, takes place, then naturally the governor has to give a report to the center saying that the constitutional machinery has broken down, and therefore the president has to intervene. There is a constitutional provision for that. Now, I do not know whether the governor has sent any such report to the president seeking the center intervention in West Bengal. If he has not done that, that means the governor is not convinced that the constitutional machinery has broken down. In the sense, the elected government is not able to maintain law and order, not save the lives of the people, etc. That has not happened so far. Anyway, this issue has gone before the court, and the court has to settle it. The constitutional issues, which I raised in the beginning, and which are carried forward by my friends, particularly the distinguished lawyer panelists. So that needs to be settled by the Supreme Court. But so far as the governor's authority, governor's power, vis-a-vis the state, the Council of Ministers, etc. These are all things which have been settled by the court. And if, as I said, there is an totally irrational decision by the state Council of Ministers, or if the Council of Ministers have lost their capacity to give any decisions, then of course the governor has to act independently. Otherwise, the governor has to act on the advice of the Council of Ministers. That is my understanding of the Constitution. Of course, this can differ from that. There is no problem about it.
Absolutely. Points taken. So, Shekhar Iyer, let me come back to you now. So, since we're talking about the incurable capacity of the elected representatives of the state and whether or not they are actually going forward and performing their duties that they are supposed to be, when do you decide whether they are incapacitated or not? What is the threshold, and who's the person who's going to actually decide? And what is the threshold that we are looking at?
Exactly, Frank. You see, whatever Acharji has said is a very perfect situation where everybody is abiding by the provisions of the Constitution, and and every person occupying the office, whether it is the governor or the chief minister or the council of ministers, are abiding by the letter and spirit of the Constitution. But West Bengal has been a very peculiar case because Acharji says that political violence has been happening, but where have you seen this cycle of violence, which is there right from, even people say it predates to even 1977, even before the Marxists came to power. In fact, that was the case of Marxists, that they were subjected to violence under the Congress era of Siddhartha Shankar Ray. Then subsequently, this cycle of violence has happened whenever there have been panchayat elections, and more so even in the last period between 2006 and 2011, and then again from that was the last phase of the left rule. Again from 2011 to 2016 and 2016 to 2021. Whenever panchayat elections have happened or civic elections happen, the violence have been such. I can recall a situation where the candidates belonging to the Congress, to the left, BJP, they went together to file nomination because they were targeted by the ruling party members. Such is the scenario there, we cannot forget. The fact that even this time, the Lok Sabha election, both the Lok Sabha elections and the civil elections had to be held in multi phases. Of course, this has been happening earlier also. The same Mamata Banerjee had demanded multi-phase election. The same Mamata Banerjee, when she was in opposition, had demanded deployment of central forces. So such has been a history of political violence where soon after the results are declared, you see a situation where the voters are targeted. You see, the whole problem there is it is not about which party is trying to dominate on whom. The idea is to send a message of intimidation and fear that if you dare to vote for party other than which is now the ruling party, you will face intimidation. And the targeted people are invariably the villagers, the poor people. This has been happening. You see, this has not happened in Kerala, where Pinarayi Vijayan came back with a handsome mandate. This did not happen in Tamil Nadu, where ADMK after 10 years had to make way for DMK. This has not happened in Puducherry, despite all the political upheaval. So, or even in Assam. Now, why is it happening only in Bengal? Why is it that constitutional authorities are put in a situation where every time they have to take a decision regarding this? Why is it happening? So, therefore, I think there is some problem which is very peculiar to West Bengal, where constitutional methods and rules and procedures are employed by political opponents in order to intimidate the other side. So therefore, the Bengal story is a completely different story because the powers of the governor, powers of the council of ministers, these are very clearly demarcated in the constitution and by several judgments. Yes, there are areas of discretion for governor. Yes, the chief minister has certain powers and is the authority. The government meets the chief minister and the council. No, these are all academically very correct situation where none of us can disagree. But sometimes the ground situation is such where you are forced to see, because even on that day, after the Supreme Court gave them bail, the Calcutta High Court sat late and cancelled that bail. And today, further year is going on there, which goes to show how can courts function. If we are only concerned about how the governor is functioning, what about the atmosphere in which the courts are functioning? Does it not provide that whichever authority calls itself the government of the day, is it not job of the government to protect the courts? Because all the matters that have been raised regarding sanctioning of the sanctioning powers of governor, these are issues which can be raised by the court, and the court is going to give a verdict. Now, why
Right.
do people there who have come to power using such muscle power, such show of intimidation, which constitution do they believe in? Can we have a constitution where only the governor has to follow, the center has to follow, but not the people who claim to be the elected representatives? Is there no bar on them? Why are they allowed to go free, spot free? Is it because they have humbled the BJP? Is it because they have humbled Prime Minister Modi through a very massive mandate? I don't think that is the issue, because we tend to look at the issue in terms of who is the victim and who is the perpetrator. My case is we should not have a situation, if we call ourselves parliamentary democracy, no party should do such things. No matter who is the winner or who is the loser, because there are larger issues involved, and these are the issues that will definitely be argued before the higher courts, because it is not just about one governor's action. Because the same argument is also made. Suppose the governor had given permission for prosecution before elections, or CBI had taken action before elections, that would have been argued by the Trinamool people as this is intimidation of political opponents. See, there are arguments on both sides, but my graver concern is those who are sitting in constitutional offices, that includes the chief minister of the day, should also follow the constitution and follow in letter and spirit, because it cannot be that only one authority who is, because even after that we have seen today, even today Raj Bhavan has complained that the Raj Bhavan is garnered by people. What is the message that the elected government is sending to the representative of the center who is sitting in the Raj Bhavan? Do we condone that just because a mandate has been got? Would we condone such act if the situation was different? Some other government was working in the center and some other government in the state was doing it. Because my point is not about which party is perpetrator or which party is the victim. My question is we have to have higher standards. Then only all the constitutional provisions, all the verdicts of the Supreme Court regarding powers will seem like really they matter. Otherwise, what we are going to see is gradually we are leading to a situation where democracy may take over in the name of democracy.
Right. Absolutely. Very valid points put forth there. Let me take them forward with Kapil Sankla now. So, who's going to ensure that the spirit of democracy is upheld? Now, that's a big question and it can be a discussion in itself, Kapil Sankla. But, in such a situation, we also have this other issue of cooperative federalism. And if the governor gets involved, then there are questions going to be asked about this front as well. So, how do we strike a balance here?
You strike a balance, as rightly said by Mr. Iyer. You strike a balance by respecting the boundaries of the state power vis-a-vis the center's power, which is represented by the governor. You see, the constitution itself and the powers are derived under Article 162, which is subjected to the state's executive power is subjected to the powers of the center. Center being represented by the governor is therefore the figurative head who is the custodian of that power. And if you go through Article 154, it says that the executive power of the state shall be vested in the governor. And now whether the governor has discretion or not has also been clarified in Article 163. Article 163 Proviso 2 says that if any question arises, whether any matter is or is not a matter in respect to which governor is or by under this constitution required to act in his discretion, the discretion of the governor in his discretion shall be final, and the validity of anything done by the governor shall not be called in question on the ground that he ought or ought not to have acted in this discretion. So the powers, the rights, etc., are clearly demarcated and stated in the constitution itself. Now, as I was saying prior here too, that the Honorable Supreme Court has also respected this. Now, understand this for a moment. Let us just forget the judgments that I referred to, the 1982 judgment, which is very clear, the Mayawati judgment, which is clear. Let us just say this, that if the state government has not granted sanction since 2019, at least when the charge sheet is ready, according to what CBI is saying, and if CBI is correct and true, then should not the governor step in? Are these not exceptional circumstances? And the governor having stepped in, I ask you again, the action begs a question: what did the state government do, and what did the accused do to challenge the sanction? What they did was they gher out the CBI office, they created a lot of hullabaloo, and then they went and got their bail. But nobody challenged the sanction, because the sanction has been tempered by many judgments of the Honorable Supreme Court. And therefore, as far as the action of the state government is concerned, is wrong, at least in this regard, that instead of honoring and respecting the judicial system and challenging it by way of a writ or under 482 of CRPC, they decided to create a melee and a hullabaloo outside, as I said, played it to the media and to the camera, rather than going to the court and challenging it. And therein is where the major lapse on the part of the state government and the accused is clearly seen.
Absolutely. Right. So it's time now to get closing comments from all my panelists with the best way forward, starting first with you, Mr. Achari.
Well, now that the case is before the Supreme Court, let them decide the constitutionality or the legality of these actions of the governor. And so far as the political issues are concerned, I am nobody to comment on that. Political issues, well, the people who are in power there and the people who are in power here, they all should respect the constitution and the rule of law. Only then things will go on smoothly. I read in the newspaper that there were two more people who were involved in this sting of, victims of, involved in this bribery. And those people have not been proceeded against. The police has not, the CBI has not arrested them because they have joined. Obviously, I do not know the reason why. But I am actually basing my statement on what appeared in the newspapers. Because that is the way in which the newspapers have reported it. So I'm just repeating that. But is it a fact that those two people have been left out and only the Trinamool people have been arrested? Now, if those two people haven't been left out and they were involved in this case, then a question arises why the CBI has left out those people. But that in no way justifies the violence that takes place. That is a different issue. But since the CBI is involved in it, naturally, CBI's action will also come under some kind of a discussion. That cannot be avoided. So these people have been arrested, but two other people who were involved in it have not been arrested at all. Now, this kind of a situation. So, who do we point our finger at? Or who all? It is very difficult for a citizen like me to reach a very definite conclusion on the basis of these facts. Things can be said in favor of one party, things can be said in favor of another party. That is the nature of politics. Sure. All political issues are like that only. But when we talk about the investigative agencies, because the motto of investigative agency is to act impartially. That is. Now, the question is whether CBI has acted impartially. I have nothing against the CBI proceeding against people who are guilty. But if the CBI does not proceed against the people who are equally guilty, then a question arises which needs to be answered. That is all what I have to say.
Right, Mr. Iyer?
Well, I entirely agree with Acharya ji that the constitution has to be followed by all in letter and spirit. We will have to respect the courts of law. There may be political disagreements, but there is no room for violence, no room for intimidation, particularly of people associated with courts of law. And at the same time, every authority who has taken office on the basis of constitution must respect the office that he or she holds, whether it is the governor or the chief minister. But my larger concern is, Frank, is concerning what is this Narada scam and Sarda scam, because we need to have a little bit understanding of that. Because Sarda scam is about thousands of people who saved money with the chit funds called Sarda scam. Sarda chit funds. They were duped because by these fly-by-night operators who vanished with the money because of political patronage. That is a bigger thing. And my concern is, despite after so many years, why has not we seen the conclusion, the logical conclusion, and people who are guilty brought to book? Because Narada is a smaller part of it. Narada shows, how these public representatives were amenable to accepting money. And again, the Narada scam story also has a political dimension, because it was a handiwork of a disgruntled Trinamool Congress leader who was very close to Mamata Banerjee, who fell out and staged this scam. That is a separate story. But my concern is, after so many years, two assembly elections have been held, but people who are guilty of duping those poor of their savings in chit funds, they have not been, brought to justice. And why are such scandals becoming tools of any political party. That is my
Sure.
larger issue, which I want to express this concern, though they may not exactly do with the powers of the constitutional authorities, but definitely it concerns the people, and something has to be done in that regard. And in that case, I would say the CBI has to do more than just this kind of prosecution that we are seeing now.
Absolutely. And Kapil Sankla, close the show for us with your quick concluding remarks.
I completely agree with the fact that CBI has always answered to his master's voice, has been a caged parrot. And it is high time that, we have a very independent and fair agency, but that's independent to what we are discussing today. I cannot really comment on Sarda scam because I represent one of the accused in the matter. But as far as this case is concerned, I will say this, that it would have been just and proper, and the proper way forward, if the state government and the powers that we would have challenged the sanction before the court rather than doing what they have done. I'm glad that the matter is before Honorable Supreme Court, and I really wish and hope that the Honorable Supreme Court actually crystallizes the law pertaining to sanction and sanctioning authority. Because it has always been a bone of contention. It has always been something wherein many dates have been wasted in arguing the matter. And you know how CBI courts tend to lean towards CBI most of the time. So I really hope that this is an opportunity also before us, that the law pertaining to sanction, but more importantly, sanctioning authority is crystallized. And that probably would be the correct way forward in this matter and for many matters to come. That's
absolutely. All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that the situation in West Bengal is peculiar and different to other states. We cannot let the constitutional mechanism fail. Extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures, and we have to do everything possible to maintain law and order. Elected representatives and constitutional authorities should work according to their mandate and should not go beyond it. The issue is less legal and more political. However, the matter is in the court, and the courts will seem like they will bring an end to it and will have the last say. Once again, thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs a daily Big Picture quiz. Please do participate by going through the description in the Big Picture videos. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and contribute. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. So do continue to show your love and support. Well, that's it from me. See you again next time, but don't forget to go through the information in the description of this video to get all the latest updates, as well as some video links for other shows as well that will help you out. See you again next time.